بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Welcome everyone in this unique event organized by the Department of Architecture under the umbrella of KFUPM Institute for Knowledge Exchange. I would like to welcome you all. Special welcome to our speakers tonight. We have with us Dr. Jasim Azhar from KFUPM, Dr. Jihad Awad from Ajman University, Dr. Jamal Al-Qawasmi from KFUPM, and Dr. Mahmoud Al-Hallaq will join us also. He is from KFUPM. Tonight's webinar is about a very important topic that is required for architects, for students, in order to improve their outputs, which is about design thinking, how it can boost the innovation in the design process. We will jump directly to the first talk, which is about what is design thinking and why it is, or is it important. Our first speaker is Dr. Jasim Azhar. He is an assistant professor at KFUPM. Dr. Azhar holds a PhD degree in architecture from Victoria University of Wellington in New Zealand. He is currently an assistant professor at the architecture department KFUPM. His research interests are architectural design, urban design, and space analysis, sustainable urban design, urban leftover spaces and their designing, architectural photography, computer visualization, and techniques. Dr. Jasim, you have 20 minutes to deliver your talk, or a little bit more. We have extra 5 minutes. Then we will start taking the questions. Go ahead.
Thank you so much, Dr. Umar, for your kind introduction. So, Doctor, can you hear me properly or not? Or should I speak more louder? Because I'm using two machines here. So one is like this one and the other one is in front of me. So can you hear me properly, Dr. Umar?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Let me just share my screen then. Please let me know once this is visible. And also this up. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you so much, Dr. Umar, for your kind introduction. I am Dr. Jasim Azhar and working as an assistant professor in architecture department at KFUPM. Today, I will talk about what design thinking is, why it is important for us, and how to achieve it through design thinking processes. I will start this presentation with an example and will pose a question to give a general idea of design thinking. In this picture, you see different sources of light emitting objects, from candle to incandescent bulb, to LED bulb, to light emitting diodes, that are the smaller ones. Which are already innovative. So the question is, what will be next in line of production, or will the object be similar or different, or will it produce more light? We do not know the answer yet, but to ask such questions, we are already thinking about the next possible solution, that is design thinking in simple words. Design thinking is created because big corporations lack the ability to be creative, and on extreme cases, are not able to create new products and services that meets the need of the customers. That is why we need to know what design thinking is. I have listed down some of the contents that are important to understand and what design thinking is, its importance and processes to achieve it. In the overview section, I will talk about the background, definition, and significance of design thinking. And afterwards, I will talk about the processes, inshallah. I will briefly explain the background of design thinking just to know where the concept came from. Design thinking as a specific process became prominent in the mid-20th century as designers of diverse expertise began to think about the end user's experience. During 1960s, the design method movements as named to be participatory design was gaining momentum through research. The participatory design was about integrating end users into the development phase of the projects from the very early stages. Technological developments during the end of this decade saw participatory design shift from a social method to a technological method. As participatory design progressed into the 80s, it became synonymous with the emerging field of interaction design. Many of the techniques used in the participatory design were borrowed from science, such as usability, testing, etc. The most significant contribution to the transformation of user development in design was introduced by design theorist Donald Norman. Donald redefined participatory design into what he called a user-centered design. User testing became less about usability and more about the user interest, and it became the stepping stone for design thinking approach. Design thinking is a skill that might seem difficult to acquire first, but is absolutely learnable. So it's a good news for us and for the students. Once acquired, problems begin to look like design problems that you have the potential to solve creatively. There is no general agreement on the precise definition of design thinking. There are variations across disciplinary cultures and different meanings depending on its context. For example, design thinking in architecture is different from design thinking in management context. Different researchers have described design thinking that improves the situation or to create awareness and empathy into idea generation, as well as creative thought to solve a problem, or it is a loop by which problems are defined, researched, analyzed, and ideas are generated. So what is design thinking? In simple words, design thinking is a set of tools, processes by which design concepts are refined creatively to solve problems. Or it can be defined as an innovative method that uses an iterative process to deliver user and customer-oriented results to solve complex problems. The approach encompasses multiple aspects, such as understanding the human perspective, challenging assumptions, redefining their problems, and crafting innovative solutions to prototypes. Design thinking is a combination of two words. One is design and other one is thinking. Design, as you all know, is an iterative process that is present in most stages of the journey from client brief to finished work. The important thing is that we can come up with a number of solutions that can be produced for any given brief, and these can differ widely in levels of creativity, practicality, and budget. Whereas thinking is the ultimate cognitive activity, consciously using our brains to make sense of the world around us and decide how to respond to it. Unconsciously, our brains are still thinking, and this is a part of cognitive process. It is well said by author Bob Will in his book of graphic design as a second language. You cannot hold a design in your hand. It is a thing. It is not a thing. It is a process, a system, a way of thinking. There are differences between design thinking approach versus other traditional approaches. The traditional approach of thinking works on two basic principles of viability and feasibility. It evaluates these two factors to assist problem solving and is highly used by business executives. Traditional thinking, as compared to design thinking, works towards avoiding failure, creating a passive experience, and giving the right answers. The traditional approach is also focused on solutions and aims to get the perfect outcome on the very first try. And you can see the differences as well here. On the other hand, the design thinking approach has 5 steps that I will also explain in the next slides, that are empathize, define, iterate, prototype, and test. It is a customer or centered approach that works towards the goal of understanding customer needs, requirements, and their expectations at what they will want. Design thinking, as compared to the traditional approach, works towards asking the right questions and creating the right experiences. We need to understand as why design thinking can be helpful and important for us. First, it is about providing innovative solutions. The research shows that design thinking is suitable for both radical products, services, and business models innovation, as well as the incremental adaptation to the existing solutions. Customer orientation and integration. This also helps to ensure that the result will meet the needs of the client, and it is in agreement to what it is developed for. This process also reduces the project risk because testing with the customer detects and eliminates incorrect assumptions. The right questions help us to express questions more precisely or even completely revise them through its explorative customer-oriented approach. Divergent thinking is about an appropriate instrument for promoting divergent thinking and ambiguity in projects in a controlled manner. Tangible results foster and requires communication through tangible prototypes that are physical. Agile approach is an iterative approach. Design thinking enables both quick delivery and the capability to modify outputs. Lastly is risk reduction. Design thinking contributes to reduction of project and developmental risks. I will not talk about the design thinking processes. There are 7 processes, and I will shall explain all of them to you. Like I will explain briefly, but let's see how much time I have left. Within the design processes, 7 steps can be identified that I will briefly explain in the few upcoming slides, starting from empathy and ending at implementation stage. Empathy is the starting point of the design thinking process. It is where the designers grasp the actual needs, wants, and objectives of the user. This stage requires engagement with the people to get an insight into their psychological and emotional demands. In this stage, it is required that the team or the researcher set aside the drafted assumptions and get the real scenario of situations through human-centered lenses. At this stage, it is required that the creator becomes aware of the user needs, which are unarticulated. It is mentioned in IDEO's Human-Centered Design Toolkit book that it is important to have an understanding of the problems and realities of the people you are designing for. The following are the empathize methods that can be used, such as assume a beginner's mindset, ask what, how, why question, ask the 5 why questions. For example, why did I made this kind of a robot? Why there was insufficient lubrication? Why the oil pump on the robot was not circulating well? Why the pump intake was clogged? And why there was no filter on the pump? So you can also think about 5 different why questions as well. Conduct interviews is another one. Use photos and videos. User-based studies. Use personal photo and video journals. Engage with extreme users is another one. Steve Jobs once said that if you define the problem correctly, you almost have the solution. It is important not to focus upon any results too early because this might restrict the space for the solution. Instead, the question and the problem definition should fuel the team's appetite for more information by provoking emotions and so that they can think out of the box. A brief is a way to deliver an information in summary that will outline the objectives of the project. These may be verbal or they can be written, they can be simple or complex. Objectives needs to be specified so that the design team knows what they are trying to achieve. Objectives are simple, that talks about what the client hopes to achieve through commissioning a design job, and it is important that these are fully understood and mapped to your design thinking. The 5 W's that are important in this stage are who is the client or the target audience, what design solution is the client thinking of, when will the design be needed and how long it will be lasted for, where will the design be used. So these are some of the questions that I just came with. We should also know how to form a good question. There are 4 ingredients for it, starting with an object in which product, services, strategies, or business models need to be taken into consideration or developed. For audience, the question should be specific as to whom the results are expected from. The question should take framing conditions of outside and potentiality of the future into account. Lastly, the final stage of the object to be achieved should be defined. Hereby I have mentioned an example, how might this object be newly made so that under the framing conditions A, B, C, the target audience can achieve end state X. Once the brief has been defined and agreed, a designer starts to search for information that can be fed into the creative processes at the idea generation stage. The search can be either quantitative with hard statistical numbers, or qualitative with information about the users, what they buy, what they consume, and their lifestyles. So this is very subjective. We usually do two types of studies. One is primary research, one is the secondary research. Primary is any type of research that you collect yourself. Examples are like surveys, interviews, observations, ethnographic research. Secondary research is about doing a desk research, and it is a method that involves using already existing data. Existing data is summarized to increase the overall effectiveness of the research work. There are some research techniques that we use quite often, such as observation, interview, engagement, participation, benchmarking. Good planning is required before implementation. Achieving an environment conducive to observation and carrying out interviews is crucial. Conversation partners needs to be proactive with a range of interests. During the idea generation stage, the person or a team draws on the research gathered and the constraints established during the previous stage of definition stage. This information is used to create ideas with which to tackle the design brief. Steven Spielberg, film director, once said about the human consciousness: your conscious shouts, hear what you should do, while your intuition whispers, hear what you could do, listen to that voice that tells you what you could do. Nothing will define your character more than that. The techniques for finding an idea in design thinking should be easy to use, even for the beginners. In design thinking, this is facilitated by continuous production of the prototypes, representatives of different ideas. Curiosity is the characteristic that every team member should allow to thrive within him or herself. Reflection is the ability of each team to reconsider his or her own actions or the actions of the others. Some idea generation techniques are brainstorming, mind maps, research, transfer and analogy, mood boards, morphological analysis, lifestyle boards, design stores, where you just store your archive of designs, and synthesis. And I can also explain them afterwards, inshallah, if anyone has any questions related to it. Prototyping is a technique in which real products, services, and business models are simulated in the form of prototypes. According to Kelly and Littman, prototyping is about problem solving. It is a culture and a language. What counts is moving the ball forward, achieving some goal, some part of your goal, not wasting your time. A prototype gives the designer and the client the ability to visualize and handle a design concept, to get an idea of its physical presence and tactile qualities as a physical object. A prototype can be tested and the technical feasibility of a design idea to see if it works with the client involvements or not. Once a prototype is developed, it provides advantages like a medium for in-team communication, uncovering previously unforeseen problems and challenges, raising new questions, reducing project risks, testing assumptions, refinement, customer feedback-based decisions, trust and gut feelings. There are 6 golden rules for prototypes. 1 question, 1 prototype. Do not try to answer more than 1 question. Don't try to be perfect. Don't fall in love. Push your boundaries, provoke to convince, and break the rules. In testing phase, this is your second last phase and the stage. In this phase, the ideas and prototypes are tried out and evaluated by the customers and other stakeholders. Feedback from the test should provoke new ideas without them being strongly attached to the prototype, simultaneously helping them to understand the problem statement and thus learn how the solution might be implemented. And you can also see it from this picture as well. Testing serves 3 purposes: gives inspiration, evaluation and the validation. Framing condition that applies to testing our appointments for conversations and focus groups needs to be planned and organized early and kept. Test participants should be treated with utterly respect as well. Implementation must ensure that the design is achieved, the client signs off with the product as expected and with no surprises. Implementation is the end of the design process and involves physically putting into effect many of the design decisions previously taken in these early stages, such as those regarding format, scale, media, and use of material. There are three things important in the implementation stage. Format selection is the first aspect of the implementation stage. You need to understand and know the output size and the shape, etc. You need to understand and consider the materials that will be used for the production. The materials used to produce a design can be finished in a number of different ways. And this is the third element of the implementation stage. So we have almost like 7 stages. I just touched upon them like briefly. In this presentation, I introduced design thinking approach, and once you will want to apply this approach, you will find out other strategies like diagramming, reflecting, and presentation stages as well. So I didn't wanted to like take more time from you, but like if you have any questions, just ask me. Thank you for listening, and if you have any questions, please do ask. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jasim, for this comprehensive and interesting presentation. We will take questions now for a few minutes, then start the second talk. We can take questions from the participants or from the panelists as well. If you want to ask any question, please raise your hand so that we can unmute you. Any question?
Any student? I don't know. Like students are attending or not? I don't know.
Feel free to ask questions to grill Dr. Jasim, no problem. طيب. No questions. طيب. That's fine. طيب, this will save us some time so that we can move forward, inshallah. If any question came to your mind later on, you can raise it, no problem. So we will move now to the second talk about design thinking, creative versus critical thinking. The speaker here is Dr. Jamal Al-Qawasmi. Dr. Jamal is an associate professor at the architecture department at Jamal University of Petroleum and Minerals. He holds a PhD in architecture, in design, computing, and visualization from Texas A&M University in the US. His research area is in design, computing, and visualization, sustainability, and regional architecture. Welcome, Dr. Jamal. The floor is yours. Okay, go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you, Dr. Omar, and good evening, everyone.
But we can't see your face in the video.
Okay, now.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. My topic is a presentation of what Dr. Jasim started, which is about design thinking. And my presentation will have these like 6 topics. Basically, the problem is just the complexity of design thinking. We listen to Dr. Jasim, and sometimes we feel this is something different of what we are doing now. Lots of books about design thinking, but you feel it's far away from what we know from design thinking. So we'll talk about the problem of design thinking in recent 20 years, design problem and design thinking, how they are related. Then we want to deconstruct, understand the design thinking phases which Dr. Jasim already touched on them. Then try to simplify and make this process easier by comparing between creative thinking and critical thinking, which is, I think, the core of this whole process. So as introduction, design thinking is just a methodology for solving design problems. And sometimes it's even called user-centered design, user-centric design. So the whole process is basically how to create a design or solution for the problem, focusing on a human being. But we find lots of different definitions, different procedural models, different disciplines sometimes feel they are far away from this dialogue. And maybe some of you have already feel that some of the jargons and the way they are presented is maybe different from the way, which is Dr. Jasim hinted on that different disciplines have different models. And this is, in a sense, is problematic. So the main problem for this, it's use disciplines. And some of the disciplines that use design thinking is the design disciplines, all design architecture, landscape, urban design, graphic design, or all these disciplines, plus businesses. All of the big names of businesses that are using design thinking as a way for innovation. So innovation, entrepreneurship is wanted by those businesses, and technology also businesses. They are engaged, and now the literature actually mainly from outside the design discipline. You can find it from the businesses and technology and disciplines and so on. And as you see, there are many design disciplines or creative design disciplines, sometimes called, and this is make the discourse of design thinking kind of, there are various kind of mystery or lack of definition, lack of models, and so on. So basically, all these disciplines, design thinking, is basically want to produce a product, or if you want a service that works and that also have a value for human beings, and of course related to business that have a revenue for that. And this is lead to different layers, different meanings for the design thinking. And again, this is, for example, there is an index, like S&P's index for big companies called DMI, Design-Centric Index. And you can see the companies, these are big businesses like Apple, Coca-Cola, Ford, all these names, IBM. The companies that use design thinking in their business in the past 10 years, they outperform, make like 200 or more revenue compared to other companies in the S&P 500. This is a major, stock market index in US. And basically there is a tracking, as you see, lots of momentum and design thinking in other disciplines. And as you see, there is even index for economic, technology, innovation companies. And most of this discussion is, focusing on what we see from the design process, but there is below the water, there is a large component of design thinking, which is sometimes misunderstood because it's been addressed by people from outside the discipline. So this is roughly the problem of design thinking and the literature these days. Literature is dominated, actually. The minority of literature is coming from design disciplines. The majority of the books, actually, if you want to look at any book, you will find basically talks about business and all this stuff. So basically here we want to look at design. If you want to understand design thinking, we want to understand what is design. Just simple thing to relate, because I think most of the audience from design disciplines, it's sometimes called design process, design methodology, design theory, theory of design, procedural theory, and opposite to substantial theory, design method, etc. All these terminologies, which is originated in design disciplines, is another name, the original name of this discipline, which is now known more as design thinking. And design thinking, simply as introduced by my colleague Jasim, is basically a tool, a method for problem solving. Now, the problems in design in general, we call it basically ill-defined problems compared to defined problems. In engineering, most of the problems are defined. When somebody asks 2 + 2, we know the answer is 4. But in architecture, if we have a problem for a student, 100 students, we expected 100 answers. There are many answers. So the problems in design usually ill-defined, sometimes called ill-structured, sometimes also called wicked problems, because it doesn't have one solution. Many solutions, more than one solution. We talk usually about space of solutions, and in those solutions there is no right, wrong answer. And this is, make this discipline is very important, because actually, if we look at the way we create knowledge, we have two main ways of reaching knowledge, through induction, deduction, and this is happening in research, scientific research. But design also is very similar to scientific research, but the methodology uses abduction. Abduction basically where the answer is not right or wrong. There is an optimal answer, because as we just mentioned, there are many answers, okay? And this type of problem solving, which is addressed by research, either induction, where we want to check probabilities, generalize from the specific to the general. Deduction, you are checking theories. Those are using critical thinking. And the human beings are good. Our mind is engineered for critical thinking, to say this is wrong or right, using rational thinking, logical, analytical, evaluation. We raise from, very young to be able to evaluate things and have rational thinking. And this is the easy part. Design is sometimes, because you have to add another component. It's not enough to have critical thinking. You have to have creative thinking, which is the difficult component of it. And other names of this, these are just the same, different terminology. If we said rational, logical, it's the same as saying critical. Of course, these are sub-component of the critical thinking. Creative thinking, you can call it also divergent thinking, lateral thinking, innovative thinking, or out-of-the-box thinking. We always have our instructors, you always saying, you have, your design to think out of the box. Yes. Core activities of design, we know we have three things we have to do during design. We do some analysis, pre-design, or during the design, we look at the site, the issues, the constraint, and then we synthesize. We create some idea, some solution, tentative. Then we evaluate this solution, and this process, the three segments, are keep repeated all the time through the life of the project. So which of these three activities, which is the core of design, is a critical thinking, and which one is creative thinking? It's clearly that analysis and evaluation, we just mentioned that. When you analyze, when you evaluate, you want to judge something good or bad, is the critical thinking part. And the synthesis, which is the imagination, the creation, is basically the creative part. So critical thinking, so design activities, 2/3 of it almost, if you want, if we take them equal in weight, is critical, which is in general, human beings, individuals are good in it. Well, the problem comes with synthesis, or the creativity, imagination, which is design thinking basically includes critical, and this is the title of my presentation. And basically we want to try to demystify design thinking by tracking those issues. So design thinking equal these two activities. If you do them well, then most probably you'll do fine in design thinking. And these are, again, in my presentation and in terminology I use here will mean the same thing. Critical thinking is convergent thinking, because we want to converge, take a decision, decide this is wrong or right or whatever. Sometimes I call vertical thinking, which is opposite lateral thinking, creative. So convergent versus divergent, vertical versus lateral. Again, for vertical thinking, sometimes use logical, rational, etc. These are the same terminology. And again, if we look at the Bloom taxonomy, these three activities, which is in design, analysis, evaluation, and creating, they are the core of design, which is the highest level according to this Bloom. These are the intellectual levels of thinking. The highest three is that we engage in design. Of course, the same model, but the model of Bloom has been changed because your creating has to be above, while the original model, it's kind of shifted. So this is roughly, we try to relate the component of design process. Now we want to just look at the phases, which is already covered by Dr. Jasim. I go quickly. So design thinking process, it's the same, the design thinking or design process. This is an architecture. We have 4 phases. Usually we talk about the pre-design or analysis stage, data collection, precept, design guideline. Then we have concept, preliminary design, then design development, and then of course, presentation, documentation. And this is, you find it in many creative disciplines, the same, components. But now when we look at, like, for example, the models presented by Dr. Jasim, these are recent, like the past 20 years, they are using those terms like clarify, or sometimes empathy, they call it, ideate. I'm just putting these numbers, which to what we do now in creative design discipline. Clarify, basically, you have to analyze there's something missing, I guess. Yeah, I think there's something missing. So I'm trying to relate these terminologies to our design. Clarify, basically, explore your objective of the project, your visions, gathering data, then define your problem, then you start ideate, generate ideas, then develop select some from your alternatives, and so on. And these are, for example, different models from different disciplines. It's kind of confusing, but the basics can be mapped easily to each other. Like in other model they are using empathize rather than clarify. We call it a pre-design or analysis stage, defining again problem seeking. Sometimes we call it rather than define empathy. Different, but basically these are different names, but the core of it is the same. This is creating complexity. This is an example of activities touched upon by Dr. Jasim. When the discovery, it's like clarify or empathy or whatever, define, ideate, generate alternative, then prototyping, mentioned by Jasim, testing of this prototype basically models, or you do your mass model, you have to create a prototype for your design, your idea, and this is how you do them in different disciplines. And so it seems to be like there's a diversity of literature which make this concept kind of mystery, unclear, and so on. So in this presentation, hopefully, if we track these models and relate them to creativity and critical thinking, things will be much easier and clearer. I think this concept is very simple, straightforward, the process, but literature make it complex. Now, as you see, basically, the main component of the process, the creative thinking, which is include imagine, invent, change, design, create, or whatever, critical thinking, you analyze, you evaluate, you compare, all this stuff. This is the core of design thinking. And design thinking, as we said, involve both. So at some point, you have to create choices, alternative, which is through the creativity. You have to have the mindset of creativity. And sometimes many of us, our students, they want to create alternatives, focusing on logical thinking, which will not lead to what he wants. Or for example, start designing, then use AutoCAD. AutoCAD, basically clean final decision. You want at the beginning to have ambiguity, openness, no critical thinking, open the door for all ideas, which is what we call divergence. Divergence basically delay the judgment or create alternatives. You have to create alternatives, create choices, then you select from them, make choices. What is the convert? This process can happen actually at every phase, stages, the 5 stages, or even actually what they call it in every design movement. Like if you design for 1 minute, you may do these 2 things. At some point, you created an idea, imagine, synthesize solution. Then after the 2nd minute, maybe you'll go, evaluate it. That means you want to converge. You compare it with a standard, you compare it with whatever the site constraint to decide on that. So basically, everyone which is missing from the models we saw, every phase, like in our model in our architecture, these phases, pre-design, concept, and it should have at the beginning divergence, openness, no judgment, allow ambiguity. Then later on, you converge on what is usually in the early design stage. We identify our goals, objectives, defining the problem, what exactly I am doing. Then in the 2nd phase, concept and design, okay, divergent, we generate ideas at the beginning, then you select some ideas, then later on design development. So this is roughly And in other models, it's basically the same. You have to have this square, basically divergent, convergent. Here, for example, this is in the problem space. Like here, we are still in the problem. We still define. We are not designing, pre-design. We still design, thinking about defining the problem. Divergent, convergent. Then again, when you start solution, you have divergent, convergent. Then you reach the solution. And all these stages, for example, I think most of them touched by Dr. Jasim. We can categorize them. Some of them is understanding. That means collecting data, go to the site, analyze the site. We just get open because we want to understand. Then at some point, so observation part of understanding. Then you define your point of view, reframing of the problem. You define the problem exactly, my goals, objectives, my vision, what they are. Then ideation, the early design process, you start more alternative. Now, many of the students have one idea and continue. This is not design. They have to divergent or make it open at the beginning in the solution. So these are different models. We find them, which is divergent, which is fact finding, then problem finding, define your problem. Then so the different models basically they have the same thing, but unfortunately they are not clearly stated. The same understand, create, deliver is composed of that. So that's one. But now the second model, actually, which is here, most of the discussion at the phase is the phase divergent or convergent, creative or critical. But there is another model which also at complexity that this divergent convergent actually happen at every design move, and I call it actually this is fine grain, model B fine grain, or the first model. Model A is basically coarse grain, CG, I call them. Okay? So we can call it at every move, which can be 1 minute, 5 minutes, whatever. You sit on your project for 1 hour. Then during this 1 hour, you will keep alternate between these two phases to reach. So this is another model. Again, for every phase, like see, or sub-phase, you have this type. This is basically mapping to our process, what we know in architecture, but other disciplines, they have more details. I think other disciplines, more accurate than us. PINA book, which is very good in the 60s, 70s. We teach it for our graduate students. They consider this. You have to define, seek. He call it problem seeking and defining problems. And basically design thinking actually, because each one of those processes is done by different. Creativity is attached to the left side, to the right side of the mind. Left-handed people, which is we call them creative people, they are just controlled by right hand of the mind, right side of the mind. So basically, when we are saying creative and critical, that means we want to use the whole brain in our process, because left brain, for example, responsible of things logical, rational, and factual, all these things which we are good in them. It is the design of our mind is for that. But creativity, whenever you propose any idea that is, many people will critique it because it seems irrational, intuitive, subjective, and so on. But we need those in the stage of divergence, alternatives, so that we will not kill ideas, so that we think out of the box. So we have, I think this is what is missing actually in many studios, many practices. We do not give this chance for the diversion convergence. Then types of thinking, what we do basically, we know this basically in critical thinking, we do analytical evaluation. This is the core of design, but also our inference. We can predict what will happen because, we are looking at the west or the east or a good view, bad view. So lots of interpretation, those goes into critical thinking because you have to judge your implementation, interpretation against some standards, some evaluation criteria, and so on. And many things. I will jump. How many time I have, Dr. Omar? Am I done?
Well, we are fine. Yeah, and you have about 15 minutes.
Another 15 minutes. Okay.
10 minutes. Yeah, 10 minutes.
Okay. Okay. So critical thinking, I will go quickly over it because we know what's the critical thinking. Basically, gathering, evaluating, asking questions, assessing bias, understanding, making inferences, as we mentioned, abstraction, all of these things. And we trained on them in schools and everyday life. basically judging if your behavior is good or bad. This is not enough in design. For example, Di Bono, which is a major person in this field, creativity, he says, in terms of creativity, creative thinking is not mystical talent. It is a skill that can be practiced and nurtured, which is good. Basically, he says we can learn creativity. Instead of telling the student, think out of the box, we can give them specific steps, which is these are the techniques. There are many techniques, like in Google, they have over 100 techniques for creativity. Most of the techniques for design thinking, they are basically focusing on creativity, how to ensure creativity are engaged, because our tendency is to be logical, to be rational. Look at, for example, Einstein, which is we look at him as number one maybe in this rational thinking, but he says, I never made one of my discoveries through the process of rational thinking. Rational thinking, and this is sometimes I see my student in the studio, they're just looking at the drawing, thinking, but this will not lead anywhere as long you are limiting your process to the rational, because actually rational thinking is mapped and connected to the your experience in life. So you for example, if you are living in a village and you saw a school just 2 rooms and so on, when you come to studio and ask you to design a school, you will always remember that's the school, because this is what you know. So there are templates, schema, they call it schema in our minds, and this is the dangerous, the problem of critical thinking. Critical thinking is good, but at the same time, it's trapping us into our box. This is why we call thinking of the box, basically to use the creative thinking. Of course, there are techniques for that, and the main goal is to get out of the limitation of logical thinking. Logical thinking, as Einstein says here, is really limiting us. It is a very strong tool, but at the same time, it's very limiting because it always limited to what we know. So basically, in creativity, it's need mindset. For example, postpone, suspend judgment. Usually, when we have brainstorming session or even brainstorming session, whenever somebody raise an idea that's really creative, you will find people with rational thinking critiquing that. But creativity will allow this openness, this flexibility, which we call divergence. Okay, so postpone. Usually, if you are designing alone or within a team, give time for the ideas. First, look at them, discuss them, so that you get out of the box, the cage you are in, which is your experience. Okay, embrace curiosity. Try to explore, and everything needs its time. You will not continue all the time. At some time, you have to judge, evaluate, analysis. Design, 2/3 of it is basically critical. But at the beginning, don't do that. Imagine like a child. These are just general stuff. If you want to be creative, you have to have those, avoid the 28 killers of ideas, as we said, which is basically you have to postpone judgment. If you judge early, problem. Be flexible. Flexibility will make you a creative person. These are general qualities that you tolerate ambiguity at the beginning. This is why your instructors usually says, do not use AutoCAD in day one of your design, because design AutoCAD or whatever the package is clear. The line is very clear. You need sketches at the beginning. That means we want to tolerate ambiguity. So that's the divergence. Every step of design, it should start with divergence, okay? Allow ambiguity, postpone judgment, and so on. Things that block creativity, mindset block. So many things, actually this is not in design, even usual business in companies. If you create or you suggest a new idea, many colleagues will say, we tried this, did not work, and so on. So basically just reject the ideas. Blocks creativity are of 2 types, individual, as a designer, and also sometimes the environment, the organization. It could be your department, your business, your company does not allow for new ideas. They just follow the paradigm they know, okay? Some other perceptual blocks. This is what we said, your experience, your knowledge in life, becoming a schema in your mind. Anything beyond this schema, your logical thinking will reject. This will not work, okay? There are also cultural blocks. Because many aspects of different cultures, doesn't want you to waste time. This is wasting of time. You go directly to the problem, right? And sometimes emotional blocks. So there are some blocks that we need also, if you want to have a creative student, designer, you have to know those issues and try to address them. And many times, for example, a new idea, this is not logical. Of course, many of we call them in design thinking, they call it temporary impossible, like stepping stones. You bring an idea that's wild, very far. It's clear, not logical. We want illogical ideas at the beginning, so that at least minimum you will get out of the box. You will get rid of this schema in your mind, because you have to move the waters. Okay, so these are usually some of the ideas which is sometimes stop creativity. Follow the rule. This is not the rules we do in our business. Be practical. This is not the practical. Of course, at some idea, we will discuss all what we propose and evaluate it, and we'll analyze it and evaluate. But at the beginning, this is the point. We start with divergence. Now, in design thinking, those traces are not very clear. You find models that sometimes even developed by people who's not very well into designs for designers or other disciplines. They are learning but they are not expert in that. So they are sometimes misunderstood. These are killers for creativity. Too expensive, need more research, no budget, many things. Of course, budget is very important, expensive, very important. But at the beginning, you should not raise this from first hour for first minute when an idea comes. Give the time, diverge in your. So this just will give one example of those. This is what we call 6 hat. 6 hats, for example, see the point. If I see here 6 hats, basically the blue is the manager. This is mainly a technique for a group design. White is information, while red emotion. Black is judgment. So you imagine either you bring a physical hat or just symbolic. So the idea of this process at one time, we cannot allow. So the problem happens like this. Somebody who is really optimistic or creative will raise an idea. If we are not using 6 hats, then directly another person in the meeting will criticize it. Clearly, those ideas are not logical. So this technique basically based on at one time, no one can, wear another hat. So this time, for example, all of us will be creative, have a crazy idea, or something good about whatever, bring some aspect good in your design. The black judgment, basically evaluation. So after we have some idea, then okay, now give me your critique, your evaluation for this topic. Some people are emotional. This is very important. Emotional people in life, very important. Now, if somebody emotionally raise an idea at the beginning, of course, those guys that's judgmental will critique it immediately. So we will not move on. The idea of this technique, basically, we want to avoid postpone judgment. At one time, all the brains work together in one direction. And this is one why I mentioned, take this example. This is mainly a group technique, but it can apply for individual, which means at one point, you should not, propose an idea and bring, even for instructors or student colleagues in the studio. If you bring somebody at the beginning, and then at the beginning we should be open and allow ideas for divergence. I will stop here. Basically, again, this is what we call suspend judgment, and just if the time allows, for example, you are in A and you want to go. So this is the idea. So you don't be right all the time. So at the beginning, you can have a crazy idea. Right? I'm done, right? Thank you. I will stop here. Thank you all for listening.
Many thanks, Dr. Jamal, for this interesting presentation. We have now a few minutes for questions to Dr. Jamal. Anybody has a question, please raise your hand or write in the chat if you wish. People usually on Zoom, they don't ask questions, but during physical or face-to-face seminars, they encourage it. Oh, we have one question finally. Okay, Basil, go ahead. Please unmute. Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Well, I have just a small question. I just want to ask, when can we call an idea as a creative idea or describe it as a creative idea? Is there like some kind of I don't know what to call it, descriptions, or an idea can be creative on its own?
Yes, that's it. Yeah, there are descriptive for that, but actually I don't like those descriptions. Actually, there are tests online if you want to test yourself and see. They will give you a score if you are creative or not. The three main components of a creative idea, they call originality. It has to be original, not similar to. So actually in the test, what they ask you, they give you any question about anything in life, designing anything. So if your ideas are really unique, then they give some grade for that. Flexibility, that means you can give many alternatives. So for example, design on whatever, something that big, something, then if you're able in 1 minute to 3 minutes, 4 minutes, it creates more alternatives. They call it flexibility. This is also a component of creativity. So yeah, there are some, ways to what they call quantify and measure. And as I said, I think called Lawrence, or what I forgot the name. It's a test online. You can do a couple of questions, I think 50 questions. And based on those, they can give you a number, what is the level of creativity. But I think what's more important for me is to know the techniques so that you will be able to give yourself a chance to come with a better idea. It's not very much helpful to look what is original. This is debatable issue. Flexibility, debatable issue. So what's the matter? Allow yourself to have divergent, that will be better. But yes, there are aspects I mentioned. I think 2: flexibility, originality, and fluently. You can create many. So I actually mix them. Fluently, that you create many alternatives. Flexibility, you can have ideas that can do many things. Synergy, they can do several things. These are 3 aspects, but actually there are many indicators, but they are groups in 3 groups for Torrance. Yeah, I think his name Torrance. All the 50 questions or the 50 qualities, they are grouped under 3 groups: fluency, flexibility, and originality. Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jamal. Any other question? Okay, that's great. Then we are free to move to the next talk with our special guest tonight, Dr. Jihad Awad from Ajman University. The title of the topic is Design Concepts in Architecture, Different Approaches. And the speaker is Dr. Jihad Awad. He is a professor at Architecture Department at Ajman University in the United Arab Emirates. Dr. Jihad is currently the head of Architectural Engineering Department at Ajman University. Prior to 2004, he has taught at different Palestinian universities. He holds Dr. Eng from University of Stuttgart in Germany, MR from Kansas State University in the US, and BSc from Yarmouk University in Jordan. Dr. Jihad has published several papers and 2 books in the field of architecture. So welcome, Dr. Jihad. حياك الله معنا.
السلام عليكم، يعطيكم العافية.
Go ahead. عليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
بس اوكي، السلام عليكم. Sorry for keeping you waiting for a few minutes. First, I would like to thank Dr. Omar for inviting me for this interesting event. And also I would like to thank Dr. Jamal and Dr. Jasim, and welcome Dr. Azhar. Your presentations, both of you, Dr. Jamal and Dr. Jasim, were really very interesting. But I have two comments before I start my presentation. I guess most of the participants are students, right? Around 12 or 13 students participating. And unfortunately, most of the students, they don't like to read. They like to sketch. They like to see using their eyes, looking at different projects. And I was wondering that the two guests, Dr. Jasim and Dr. Jamal, which was for me very interesting what they presented. I really liked it and learned a lot from it. But there were no architectural examples. It's more theoretical, you know. And for our students, we all know that they don't like much to read, unfortunately. Second point, I really learned a lot. It was my first time to see this 6 hats by Dr. Jamal, but still something I didn't understand, the 28 killers. Okay, I will search for it, and I hope I will learn it. For my presentation, I will go directly to architecture and focusing more on the term concept in architecture, which is really problematic and confusing for many students, especially at the beginning of their study in architecture. There are so many different definitions for the term concept in architecture. My presentation for today consists of 2 parts. I hope it will not take much my presentation, not like Dr. Jamal's 61 slides. I have almost half of it here, around 35 slides. So I hope it will be a little bit short. It consists of 2 parts. One part, it's mainly from internet, you know, extracts from different sites related to the definition of concept in architecture. So these are not my words. I will go through it quickly. And in the second part, I will talk about my book. So the first part, it represents the reasons and the confusion why I thought of having a book or making a book, talking about design concepts in architecture. In the second part, I will talk briefly about the story of the book. And then after that, I will show some examples from the book, which hopefully can help clarifying, let's say, for some students, the meaning of concept, maybe. I will start with these sketches. These are from internet, not from my book. As you can see here, the poor students, they always suffer and they try to explain and explain and explain to their professors their concepts. And the professor simply relaxing, and after listening to the student, he simply says that this is not a concept. Then the student gets confused more and more. What is concept? Of course, I am sure that all of you probably have faced the same question by many students, always. Professor, doctor, please, can you explain to us what concept means? And whatever you try to explain to them, they will be confused. As you can see here in these sketches, and the last one down right, you can see that the student gets F. Why? Because her concept is potato. And by the way, this is real. It happens. And many times we have students who say that, okay, Doctor, my concept is apple. Doctor, my concept is a fish or a snake or whatever, or a boat, something like this. Well, I could find through communicating with many architects, and we can read also on internet. There are some architects who really go in this direction sometimes, but still they are doing good architecture, at least for some people. What is concept? This is also, again, from internet. It's not my words. Concept is about grasping or holding onto the real. Concepts are, I will not go through it. I will not read all of the text here, but I find it that it might be more confusing for students, because even after they read it, they might not understand every single word. Then we go here, analogical concepts, weak concepts, figural concepts, vague concepts, experiential concepts, private concepts, syntactical or formal concepts, typological concepts, poetic concepts. These are more confusing for students, I can say this. Then we have also other definitions by different people. A concept in architecture is an idea, thought, or notion that is the main element that drives the design project forward. Long text here. The next one. Concepts are ideas that integrate various elements into a whole. It supports the main intention and goals. The third one. A concept in architecture is an idea, intention, or inspiration that establishes the foundation, etc. Many people have many definitions for the same term concept. Here, another one classifies or categorizes different types of concepts. Analogies, looking at other things. Metaphors or similes, looking at abstractions. Essences, looking beyond the programmatic needs. Programmatic concepts or problem solving. And ideals, the fifth one. Okay, it does. Another guy classify architectural concept as follows. Biomimicry with examples. An example by Gaudi, Sagrada Familia. Public and private. Separation or the zone between separating private from public domains. Light, the Church of Light by Tadawand and the Louvre in Abu Dhabi by Jean Nouvel. Abstract ideas. The one on the right is by Bjarke Ingels, big architects. This is in the Serpentine Pavilion. Sensory perception. Symmetry. The Louvre on the right by MP. The one on the left, I guess, by Louis Kahn. But by the way, these examples are not in my book, as I said. These are all from internet. Form and volume. Sorry. The one on the right is by Rem Koolhaas, OMA. The one in the middle by Santiago Calatrava. Journey and movement. You have here 3 examples and the following slide also. You all know the Guggenheim Museum by Frank Lloyd Wright. This is Nanjing Museum by Stephen Hall in China. And this is a museum in Brazil by Alvaro Siza. And this one here, it shows movement. This is a memorial in Ramallah in Palestine for Mahmoud Darwish. It's designed by Jafar Toukan. Now, here we see important definitions and material, many papers, and lots of literature about design concepts. This is one example here by our friend, Professor Yasser Mahjoub. It's available in internet. You can easily find it. If you just Google for Yasser Mahjoub, you can find lots of publications by him talking in more details about design concepts. This is also by Dr. Yasser Mahjoub. He focused more on metaphor and analogy. As you can see here, he shows also different examples for each one of these two approaches. And he tried to put it in diagram, the concept. As you see, the big circle for him is the concept, which includes many things: site, program, exterior form, and interior space. When we talk about form, exterior form, I also wanted to comment on the two presentations by Dr. Omar and by Dr. Jamal and Dr. Jasim, that almost all architects in the world know all these principles and theoretical bases and analysis that you came across. So I wanted to ask, and I wonder, how many of the international well-known architects do really follow such principles, let's say, or ideas, the theoretical basis, I mean. In my opinion, after my experience, preparing for the book, I found that the majority of architects, they pay more attention to the form at the end, which is, sorry to say this, but this is a fact, and we will see in the examples that when they talk about the concept, it looks like just writing a story to justify their end product, which is the form. And you can feel that their main concern was probably from the beginning is the form, and the external of the building. Of course, with some exceptions, there are so many architects who really pay more attention to the spaces inside and to the function and to the spatial distribution. Now, this is for our students here. There are concepts that work well for a particular type of design problem. It is such a widespread idea that some students have a misconception that it would work well for every project. It is no surprise how disastrous it proves to be. With various sites, contexts, availability of materials, and construction facilities, diverse projects require a suitable approach to deal with. What works well for a particular problem may not solve the purpose of another. And I don't know whether you all came across this experience with the students or not. We have seen, throughout my academic experience, I have seen some cases where the student keeps always using the same, what he calls concept, for each project. If you give him a school, he will use almost the same thing. If you give him a museum, he will use almost the same thing. Give him a hotel, the same thing. Cultural center, the same thing, the same. And he thinks that, okay, he can have one concept which can be applied to all types of projects. Now, let's talk about the story of the book. It's a long story. I'm not going to go through it, from A to Z, but I will try to summarize it briefly. The story starts with communicating with a few architects. I remember 5 architects. I have good relation with some architects at the beginning, including Rem Koolhaas, Hans Wein, as I remember, that was a long time ago. Rasim Badran and Axel Schultes from Germany. And then I discussed the idea with them. I told them there is always a problem with the students. The students, they always want to know and to understand the meaning of concept in architecture and how to deal with concept in design. So I discussed the issue with them that I'm planning to make a book, trying to explain or to show the students as much as possible of different approaches by different architects, how to deal with concept and its interpretation. So they agreed on that. I told them, okay, can we start gathering information? Is it possible that you provide me with each with 3 projects, with sketches, drawings, images, above all a text describing the concept. So they encouraged me and they agreed to provide me with at least 3 projects. And I told them from the beginning that I'm going to use their own words. I'm not going to change anything. I'm not going to use anything from internet. I will use only the material that I received directly from the architects. And they responded to me quickly. Within 1 week, they provided me with even more than 3 projects from each one of them. My purpose was to have material from 10 architects, each 3 projects, in the total around 30 projects. That will be enough to show the students the different approaches by architects in dealing with concept and its interpretation. The second week, I received also responses from other 5 architects, including the office of Zaha Hadid. This encouraged me. And then I said, okay, so quickly I could get material from 10 offices, from 10 well-known architects. Then I said, okay, let me expand this. And then I started searching for the emails and addresses to contact other architects. I reached 20. Then another 10, 30, another 10, 40. Honestly, I enjoyed it. And I was happy that I'm communicating directly with international architects, and they were responding to me quickly. That was also encouraging. And every time, whenever I sent a group of architects, I put a list, I attach a list with names of architects that they already provided me with material. And they were sending me high-resolution images. And they were so generous. Some of them, or many of them, they sent me even more than 3 projects, 5, 6, 7, 8 projects. I was happy at that time. I didn't realize that this will create so many problems for me later on when I want to prepare for publishing the book. Anyways, shortly, I forgot myself. And then I found myself reaching 80 architects, international architects. I said, it's enough. I have to stop there. Now I'm telling you this story, which took 4 years. This story lasted for 4 years, communicating with the architects, most of them directly to the architect, the principal architect himself or herself. In some cases, I was communicating with the media office or the public relations department, and they were providing me with high-resolution images, drawings, sketches, whatever I requested from them. But most important for me was the text. I was explaining this to them from the beginning. I'm going to use your own words, focusing on the concept of the project. So that was mainly the main idea, that I wanted to present to all students as much as I can of different approaches by international architects to show how they deal with concept, what is their interpretation, you know. And I also avoided to classify or to categorize the architects, you know, or to put the different concepts or approaches in different categories. I said later on, maybe other people, you know, or jointly with other people, we can work on this later on. Anyways, after 4 years, it took 1 more year just filtering the material, selecting the projects, because I cannot publish, I cannot include all the projects that I received from all architects. Some of the architects, they provided me with 10 projects. I cannot put 10 projects for one architect and 3 projects for another. So I had to select. This also took time. Which projects to select if they provided me with more than 3 projects? And most of the time, the 3 projects I was requesting, I already specified which projects I want from this or that architect. You know. Only with a few cases, I was unable to select. You know, the architects themselves, they selected and they sent to me. You know, they didn't give me the choice to select or to specify which projects I want. I was always looking for the most recent. This was one of the points. It was not the only criteria, but it was one of the points I took into consideration, because I wanted the book and the projects to be updated as much as possible or up to date. The reference, by the way, I forgot to mention this. The reference for me throughout this journey from the beginning was my friend, Allah yarhamu, okay, he passed away recently, who was Charles Jenks. And he volunteered also to write the foreword for the book. So he wrote the foreword for the book. I wrote the introduction. And also another professor who also was interested in reviewing the book, Professor James Steele. He also reviewed the book. And both of them, they encouraged me from the beginning, you know, from day one. Sorry, just to make sure that you all hear me. You all hear me?
Yes, we are with you, Dr. Jihad. Go ahead.
فكرتكم انتم. Okay. Okay, these are the covers for the 4 volumes. I ended up with 4 volumes. My plan was from the beginning to have only 1 book, 1 volume, you know, with 10 architects and 30 projects. I ended up with 4 volumes, 80 architects. The total number of projects in these 4 volumes is more than 250 projects. The number of pages is 1,860 pages. The weight, it's 9 kilos, which is too much. Okay, as you can see here, but by the way, do you see the pointer? I'm not sure if you see the pointer. You see the pointer? Anyway,
yes.
I will go through these photos on the left, you know, from the top, I will go. The first one, the top one was with Charles Jenks. The next one with Santiago Calatrava. And the third one with Patrick Schumacher from Zaha Hadid office. And the fourth one with Kin Young. and the fifth one with David Ajay, and the last one with Francine Hauben, the principal architect of Meccano. They all came to us, and they also got a copy of the book. Okay, let me. What's going on? I want to move to the second slide. Yes. So here on the left side, you can see the names of the architects, the 80 architects. Well, in fact, they are 82. The real number of international architects is 82, not 80, because we have two cases where we have the father and the son, and they have two separate offices. They don't work together, like IMP and also Alvaro Siza, as far as I remember. This one is probably more clear with their websites. Okay, the real number is 80 international architects. But just before publishing the book, the publisher, he added a few more architectural offices from the region, from the Gulf region, in addition to those 80 architects. So it includes also, and also the sponsor, somehow the sponsor of this book, that was an agreement between the publisher and the sponsor. It's the Jam'iyyat al-Ulum al-Imran, Saudi. I think they sponsored, it was an agreement between them and the publisher. I have nothing to do with it, but they have something to do with publishing the book. Now, here is the statement by James Steele, who reviewed the book, recommending that architects and students should have this book. Then this is what Charles Jenks wrote. These are extracts from the foreword by Charles Jenks. The concept is a key to the transformation moment and becomes one of the strongest motivations in making powerful buildings. Can push the designer to excel. Without a concept, the architect usually becomes confused and lacks conviction. He gives some examples here, talking about Le Corbusier and Koolhaas, Peter Eisenman, Zaha Hadid also. Then he says the concept is the machine for producing art. It is the underlying generative idea. Till here is the end of the story. Now I will present some examples, selected examples, just to show from the book, just to show the different approaches by international architects in dealing with concept and their interpretation for concept. And the students can see the diversity of approaches. And that was the main purpose. Yeah. I wanted to show as much diverse approaches as possible, to students. So we can start with, and by the way, Dr. Omar, you can stop me anytime, okay? Because now I will start showing examples, many examples. Of course, I cannot show the 250 or more projects, but I selected, and honestly, I have to say that not carefully. I selected these because more than 250 projects, it was difficult for me even in a short time to select representative, let's say, examples, but I came across many projects that will explain somehow different approaches.
You have 10 minutes, Dr. Jihad.
10 minutes, okay, that's fine. Now we are here in slide 24. The total is 34 slides. I'm not going to read. I just made it in red color, you know, the keywords here for each architect in each project. So here I start with Zaha Hadid. This is unbuilt project. I am not sure if this will be built or not, but this was a competition for a cultural and opera, cultural center and opera in Amman, Jordan. And she won the first prize, but she was not the only project to have the first prize. There was also another project. They also gave the other project first prize. The other project was by two architects from Vienna. They are called Delugal Meisel. They also designed the Porsche Museum in Stuttgart and the Eiffel Museum in Amsterdam. That was also very interesting. It's also included in my book, but I'm not showing it here in this presentation. Anyways, here, this is one of the projects that I really like by Zaha Hadid, which has, in my opinion, a strong concept. Her main concept here is inspired from Petra, Lial Batra. Usually, we have seen, even in Jordan and Amman, we have seen some buildings where the architect tried to imitate or to copy, you know, the same architecture of Petra in the new buildings. But here, Zaha Hadid, she had completely different approach, you know. Although she inspired the ideas from that place, from the same place, from Petra, but she didn't go for imitation or copying, you know. She took from that site, from the area of Petra, you know, the erosion idea, the carving, the color, the sculptural forms as a result of erosion. And this was within one cubic form. And the cubic form here, it represents also the stone. And we all know that the majority, if not all, of buildings in Amman are out of stone. Yani the building material stone is an important element there, you know. So she took like a stone and then started curving or carving from this stone to show something like erosion. I am not sure, maybe Dr. Omar or Dr. Jamal can provide me with more information whether this project is under construction or it will be built or not. I am not sure, I have no idea about it. Then we have another project by Toyo Ito, the Japanese architect. As you can see even from these three top right photos. But as he wrote, it's mainly derived from the type of trees that are in the site there, around or surrounding the building. So he inspired the idea from trees. At the same time, these elements were also structurally, there were no columns inside the building. So he combined the structure with these elements that look like branches of tree. And here we have two examples by two different offices. On the left is by Peter Eisenman, Cultural Center in Spain. His main idea is topological surface and topography. And then instead of dealing with figure ground, he was dealing with figure urbanism, as he called it. And then on the right is by Dillard, Scofidio and Renfro, an office in New York, where this building is, or this structure, in fact, is in Switzerland. And as you can see, fog and cloud, that was the main idea for them. Then our friend who also passed away 2 years ago, I think, Will also from UK. On the left, he developed a building along the river there in Manchester, which is called Chips, you know. And he showed us when he presented this at Ajman University, he showed us also a short movie for three pieces of three pieces of potato, you know, French fries. He put them on top of each other, and then he said that he inspired the idea from these pieces. And on the right is, I guess, a well-known building. You all know it. This is a design center in Canada, where he called it tabletop, you know, and it was in collaboration with the faculty, the staff there, and students even. They had workshops before they started the design until they reached at the end this solution. And they wanted to keep the old building, as you see below, the new one, the new pixelized one. They wanted to keep and restore the historical building, and to keep the park, which is like a plaza there, covered by the new building. Then I assume you all know it. You all know these two examples, at least the one on the right side, you know. The one on the left is by Mario Botta. It's a wellness center in Switzerland also. This is what he called trees of light. These artificial trees, as you can see it from the sketch, yani, on the right side of the real building, the real photo. And then the one on the right is by Santiago Calatrava. It's in Valencia, in Spain. It's obvious, and no need to say anything. It's very clear, you know. The thing also that we need to mention here is that this here looks like an eyelashes, you know, which close and open, which is the habit of and the style of Calatrava. He designed several buildings where they have kinetic or movable parts, like the Milwaukee Art Museum in Wisconsin, in the United States, and even the latest, which I have seen recently in Dubai Expo, which is the UAE pavilion, which has some parts, moving parts. So this is the case of Calatrava. We all know also that he is an architect as well as a civil engineer, structural engineer also, which helped him yani, to implement such projects. Now, the one on the left is by Arata Isozaki. It's a convention center in Doha. As he wrote, the key word here is the cedar tree, which is also the cedar tree is the symbol for the educational city. You know, this is part of the educational city in Doha. So the symbol for the educational city is the cedar tree, and he inspired the idea for the facade from the cedar tree, as he says. Now, the interesting one on the right side is by Stephen Hall. It's a museum or art center in Denmark. This is somehow a bit strange, you know. He inspired the idea from textiles. The city has a long history in producing clothes and shirts, textile there. So he inspired the idea from shirt sleeves, you know, as you can see here on this one on the left. Put them together, you know, and then he came up with this design so that if you look at it from the top, it looks like sleeves, you know, put together. And then we have two examples here. The one on the left is by Daniel Libeskind. It's called Imperial War Museum in Manchester. the main idea or the main concept is a globe shattered into fragments, and then he put them together, you know, in three masses, which represent earth, air, and water. According to him, by the way, all these texts are from the architects directly from them. So I'm using their own words, it's not from internet. And then on the right is Busan Cinema Center in Korea by Wolf Prix. Wolf Prix is the principal architect for Code Blau. And the key word for his concept is virtual sky, as you can see. He's the one who also designed the BMW World in Munich, which also has something similar, you know, like cloud or artificial or virtual sky, you know, artificial cloud, let's say, use this term. And then on the left here, it's very obvious, whirlpool, you know, for an aquarium by 3XN. The main architect, the principal or the founding architect is Kim Nielsen from Denmark. And on the right side is the National Museum of African American History. It's just next to the Congress and to the White House in the same area, which is called the Mall. As you can see here on the far right, you see the monument there, which is called the Monument, Washington, D.C., the capital. He inspired, as he says, he inspired the shape from the angle here at the top of the monument. If you can see it, he took the same angle, you know, and he repeated it here, you know, and he even used the same similar panels to the and materials to the monument, and he also used the patterns on the facades, inspiring it from the African American craftsmanship, as he says. And then here we have on the left, I assume you all know this library, it's Seattle Library by Rem Koolhaas. And next to the photo here, you can see this diagram showing the program of the project and how he developed the form. You know, the keyword is overlapping platforms. He divided the program into two groups, you know, one group he called stable, the other group is called unstable. And then the one on the right is by Meccano. The principal architect, the founder is Francine Hauben. This is art center in Taiwan. Simply, the key word for the concept is banyan trees, you know, which is common there. You can see from the sketches here, I don't know if you can see it or not, from the sketches photo. A photo here for the park, for the trees, and then how she abstracted that photo until she reached something that can be converted into an elevation facade, which is like this. And then there is a kind of theater, outdoor or amphitheater, which is part of the roof, where it goes down to touch the ground, you know. It's more clear in other photos from the other side, from that side. Then you all know the one on the left, which is by Jean Nouvel, the Louvre in Abu Dhabi. As he says that it's inspired by the Arabic architecture, mainly the dome, the cupola, you know, and emphasizing the light here and shade, you know, and the shadow and the white color, you know. He pays special attention to the spaces between the cubic forms beneath that dome, you know, and the spaces between, even space between these masses, below the dome. It's very interesting. I hope you all can visit it. And then on the right side, it's by MAD architects from China. The principal architect is Ma Yansong. This is an interesting museum, long and narrow, you know. As he says, it's a contrast between the elegance of nature and the speed of daily life. So in keywords, he says, fluid frozen in time. There is a lot of snow there in that area. So he inspired the idea to freeze time, you know, or yeah. According to him. And then this is the last slide. I guess we end the presentation with flowers, with rose, you know. The one on the left is by Henning Larsen. It's Massar Children's Discovery Center. Unfortunately, this is not completed. The skin is ready, it's completed. And then, you know, because of the situation in Syria, they couldn't complete it. But it's obvious from the sketches, you know, how he inspired the idea and what he wanted to do. At least he was obvious and he was clear and straightforward. You know, we all know just without reading, you know, if we just look at the sketches and the 3D here, the render, then we understand, you know, with no need to read. The one on the right, you all see it, you know, this is Oriental Art Center in Shanghai, China. We all see the photo, the real photo. We all see the sketch here. And I read the text that he sent to me, Paul Andrew, he's from France, Paul Andrew. I read the text that he sent to me several times, in order to find one word talking about a flower, which we see obviously here, you know, but he avoided to write it. It's not there. He didn't write any single word, you know, referring to flowers or rose or whatever. Anyways, I will stop here. Thank you, Dr. Omar.
Many thanks, Dr. Jihad, for this informative and interesting presentation. Actually, we learned a lot about many ideas and innovations. Thank you very much. Any question to Dr. Jihad?
I hope the students will not be more confused after this presentation. Understanding the concept.
We have a raised hand from Basil. Please go ahead, Basil. Yes, we can hear you.
Assalamu alaikum. I just want to ask, is the concept as it was described a core element in the designing process, or is it just an added value to the project?
In other words, and we always receive a similar question that, is it necessary that we have a concept for each project? Yes. Maybe it's the same question, you know. And I am sure even my colleagues here, they also have faced the same question, you know, by many students. And we always have this question, this kind of question. Do we have to have concepts? Okay, what is the importance of the concept? Okay, can you explain to us concept? What do you mean by concept? And my short answer to them simply is that when you know what you want to do, then you have a concept, despite what your concept is. So my main point here is that we should develop a conscious design. I call it conscious design, you know, not accidental design. I mean, we have to be aware of what we want. First, we have to identify, you know, what we want to produce. To answer your question straightforward, I can say yes and no. You know, yes, in some cases or in many cases even, we design things, or there are many projects, many designs that don't have, let's say, clear-cut concept. You know, they just go for implementing the program of the project. You know, it's more functional or rational, let's say. And not all projects that have concepts must be, you know, by default good projects. Sorry to say this. Sometimes, yeah, the architect can have a concept which looks like silly, you know, sometimes, sorry for using this word, but, or naive, you know, or superficial, you know, or weak. But at the same time, if you have a good concept, a strong concept, you know, your project will become really interesting and strong project. So it always depends on the idea itself, the concept, and we call it the power of the idea. You know, sometimes you can find projects that look like very simple from outside, you know, but the concepts inside that are implied in the design, if you know it and if you understand it, you know, and if you understand the story behind the spaces and the design, your impression about that building will be different, you know. And I always say that it's not necessarily that the concept is reflected on the form. Not necessarily. There are so many projects. Unfortunately, I didn't have enough time to find out or to show some of the examples where the concept is very, very strong and powerful, you know, after you explain it, or after you understand it, after you understand the ideas that are implied in the design, which probably are not reflected directly into the form, you know.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jihad.
Any other questions?
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you very much, Dr. Jihad. Thank you, Dr. Assam. Also, many thanks to Dr. Jasim and Dr. Jamal. Many thanks.
Pleasure. It was a pleasure to meet all of you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Our thanks also are extended to our students and guests in this forum. Hopefully, we will meet you in another event organized by the Architecture Department. Our special guests, you will receive, inshallah, a certificate of appreciation from the university. Thank you for attending, and thank you for your time, and see you in a good time.
Thank you, and hope to meet you physically, inshallah, one day.
Inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.